up next. Alicia Butler-Pierre is the founder and CEO of Equilibria, a global operations firm helping fast-growing businesses scale efficiently. A TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and top-ranked podcast producer, she's also a Purdue instructor and was named a top 50 thought leader in operational excellence. Her mantra is, "Leave it better than you found it."
Thank you so much for joining this session. We're going to tailor this talk about building high impact teams. I know that is what the focal point of the theme is for this particular day of the Workfront Summit. So thank you all so much for joining. I know many of you have already shared where you are from, but if you wouldn't mind, can you start putting in the chat whether you are a recruiter, a founder, a CEO, or just an ambitious professional? So please put that information in the chat because I'd like to tailor what I'm about to say based on who is actually participating right now. And I can't see if anyone is actually presenting anything in the chat, but I'll just keep going. So welcome everyone. I am Alicia Butler-Pierre. I am actually the founder and CEO of a company called Equilibria. And Equilibria is headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia, which is in the southeastern part of the US. I do need to see my slides, please. Let's see. Okay. And what we do at Equilibria is we're all about operational excellence and something that we refer to as business infrastructure. So business infrastructure, if we think of a talent equation, business infrastructure takes a look at the people, the processes, and the tools and technologies that it takes to make a business scale, not only profitably, but sustainably and in a repeatable manner. And we have actually come into contact with Talentvo as a result of a conference that we attended in Qatar a couple of months ago, and we are now registered as a business there as well. So that puts us in a strategically geographic location as well to be able to better service those of you. Many of you, it sounds as though you are across Africa, as well as in other parts of Europe, as well as Asia and Asia Pacific. So again, very excited to be here. And that gives you just a little bit more information about who this company is. I'm going to share with you, before I get to that next slide, what I'm going to share with you is a story, because I think the best way, rather than just teaching you some concepts that you may not be able to apply, and I know that was a big part of what yesterday's presentation was about, was not actually just learning information, but being able to apply that information. And I thought the best way to possibly talk about the talent equation and how to build high impact teams would be to share a very recent story with you. This is actually something that happened to me just 2 weeks ago, or over the past 2 weeks. It's what I call the tale of two banks. So imagine I'm American, and I go to Qatar to open up a new business bank account. So I went in there with an open mind, but I also went in there expecting to have certain issues, but the issues that I expected to have ended up not being the issues that I actually experienced. And this speaks very clearly to the importance of putting people first, as so many of you just mentioned in the chat right before we started this particular presentation. So again, to set the stage, this starts off, if we look at that very first little icon, there's a globe, as well as you can see a hand pointing to a phone. This actually started 2.5 weeks ago when I was attempting to apply for a new business bank account as a small and medium enterprise for this particular bank, which shall remain anonymous. We'll just call it Bank One. And I started encountering some issues. I filled out the information on the website, but for whatever reason, I was unable to actually click the submit button. And I thought, well, maybe it's just a glitch. So I tried a couple of other times. I used different browsers. I used both my laptop as well as my phone to access this form. I just could not get it to work. So I figured, well, maybe it's because I'm here in the States. Maybe once I actually get inside the country, things will work accordingly. Well, I actually fly. I arrive at the bank, which is the next little symbol here that you see in the process. And I'll just use my mouse here so we can follow along with this story. And I'm a potential customer with money ready to deposit into a new business bank account. I first was greeted by a security officer. The officer asked the reason for my visit, and I mentioned to him that it was to open a new small or medium enterprise business bank account. He immediately directed me to a queue, which was a very long queue. And there were two people working at this desk. And this was before you could speak to any bank teller or any other bank representative. You had to first talk to these ladies, and they served as sort of a triage, if you will. Once you told them the nature of your or the reason for your visit, they would then direct you as to what your next steps should be. So I stand in this queue, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And by the time I actually get to speak to them and tell them the reason for my visit, I was asked if I had completed the application online. I mentioned to them that I was unable to successfully apply online. They insisted that I had to apply online first before I could go any further. So I go back to my phone, still couldn't apply. Even though I'm there in the bank and I am in their country, I was still unable to submit the form online. I went back to stand in the queue, waited again for a very long time before I told the same lady again. But this time I had my phone and I could show her where the error message was and what it looked like and what it said specifically. She directed me back to the security officer. The security officer then had me go and fill out a form on a kiosk to schedule an appointment with an actual bank representative. Unfortunately, I could not get an appointment that same day. I had to come back the next day. And when I spoke to that bank representative, she handed me a thick stack of forms that she told me I needed to fill out. So I was getting excited because I was thinking, even though this is going to be manual, at least I have some forms that I can start filling out to get this process started. But no. She said, you fill out these forms, but you still need to go online and fill out the initial form online. And I just felt like I was in this matrix, if you will, like I was caught in this matrix that I could not get out of. And so I walked away frustrated, tired, because I spent 2.5 days actually in the country trying to get this resolved, and I couldn't. But if we factor in the time that I spent before I even arrived in Qatar, the total time was 2.5 weeks. So this was clearly a bank that had a tech-first approach. They were insistent that I, as a potential customer, use their technology first, even though I was physically present in their bank. Let's look at Bank 2. So I left Bank 1. I got back onto my phone and I remembered the name of another bank, and I was told that this bank was a little bit smaller. And I just took a chance. I literally went down the street to Bank 2. So there's Bank 1, there's Bank 2. I could easily walk from one bank to the other one. Bank 2 had more of a tech-forward approach. Very similar to Bank 1, they also had an online application. I showed up as a customer. at the bank. I was immediately greeted by a security officer, but that's where the similarities to Bank One end. I was immediately shown to a bank representative who gave me 1 or 2 forms to fill out. He explained the process to me, and in less than 30 minutes, I had a new business bank account. So keep this in mind. If we look at Bank One, if we look at Bank Two, they had the same technologies. They both had websites. They both had online forms where you could begin the new bank account opening process. They requested roughly the same information from potential customers, but here's what was different. Bank Two had a people-first approach. Tech forward, but people first. And their people were trained to properly guide customers and troubleshoot issues. Bank One, I kept telling them I had technical issues. No one was trained to help me deal with those technical issues. And guess what? They lost a potential customer. Bank Two, there was one slight technical glitch, but they immediately corrected it and everything moved very smoothly. I mention this story because I think it's a classic example of where we are in the world right now. All the world is talking about AI and technology. And don't get me wrong, it's all very exciting. We're using technology right now to have this virtual conference. So technology is great. It has the ability to bridge gaps, bridge talent gaps, knowledge gaps. But what happens when the technology doesn't work? Do you have a backup plan? This is why we need to always keep people and our customers at the center or at the heart of everything we do. Okay? And when it comes to efficiency, being efficient in the technologies that you're using, being efficient in the way that you provide a particular service, or efficient in the way you produce a product, that is not a Western concept. Being proficient in your use of technology, being proficient in the skills that you have already developed, that's not just a Western concept. And being transparent about the work that is being done, the work that needs to be done, and being transparent about what your skills are as a professional, these are not concepts that are limited to Western businesses. What was frustrating for me is when I would hear people say, oh, well, that's how it is in other countries outside of the US. And I never want to be that American, right? Because I don't believe that. And I know that it's not true. But what is true is there is a difference or a lack of access to resources. That is a huge difference that I have personally noticed in my travels to multiple countries around the world. So to that extent, that is why I am here. And I'm so glad that I've been invited, because my company specializes, again, in creating business infrastructure. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for me to be able to give a proper demonstration, but I do want to share with you all some of the very basics or the highlights so that you can hopefully take that information, and I'll provide some additional resources for you that are free that you can leverage to further your knowledge of business infrastructure. It starts with identifying all of the different tasks and tools or technologies that are used within an organization. Or it could be specific to your team or specific to a particular department that you are working in. So in this picture here, you'll notice that that's me and one of my clients. She is also here in the US, and she has a business where she plans events for other organizations. And those large sheets of paper that you see on the wall behind us, that was the result of a very rigorous brainstorming exercise that we went through, trying to understand everything that has to be done to operate the business on a day-to-day basis, no matter how simple it is or how complex it is. Here's a key component. That brainstorming exercise is only something that we as humans could do. That's not something that AI could help us figure out. This is her business, and the way she does her business and conducts her business is unique to her. The way your company works is unique to your company. However, we did use AI as an assistant. So if we ever got stuck on the right way, the correct way to word something or the correct way to say something, that's when we might leverage Perplexity or ChatGPT or Gemini if we ever got stuck with something. But we used a people-first approach when it came to the brainstorming. Now, in the second picture, we take all of those tools, all of those tasks that have been identified, and they're transferred onto these little note cards. So what you see in the picture there ahead of you on the screen is several tables that we've pushed together. And just imagine, I'm showing here just some cards that are just representative of what would be tasks. So imagine what I have here is B3, and on this card A2, that these represent different tasks that have to be performed in your team, your department, or your organization overall. We spread out all of those different tasks. We start to organize those tasks into groups based on the similarity of the content of the tasks. And then we look at each task one by one, and we ask ourselves, in a perfect world, if we had access to all of the resources that we needed, who ideally should perform, for example, task A2? Well, it's very common, especially for those of you who are founders that are participating in this session right now. We do everything, right? We typically tend to do everything. So I don't know if you can see this here, but I have a little stick figure and I've written the word CEO. So we might say, oh, well, as the CEO, I currently perform that role. But that's not what the goal is. The goal is to figure out who ideally should perform this task. Just because you could doesn't mean that you should. The idea is to think about who is the ideal candidate to perform that task. So it might actually be, this is just an example, an office manager, and hopefully you all can see this. Okay, so we've gone from what we originally identified as something that a CEO or a founder should do, and we've transitioned that to really thinking about who ideally should perform that work. And it would be an office manager. Again, that's just an example. But once you have taken all of these little stick figures, all of these note cards, and you've properly matched skills or tasks to a specific role, that's when you can start thinking, if you are a recruiter or if you are an actual founder, you're in charge of hiring people, that's when you can start to have a discussion about, okay, is this a full-time position? Is it a part-time position? Will this position be 100% remote or virtual? Is this position 100% in person? We need someone actually in the office with us. Can there be a hybrid approach where maybe most of the time the person is working remotely, or the other half they might be working from home? Can you leverage interns? Can you leverage volunteers? What work can be outsourced to other people so they're not necessarily employees, but you still have someone else doing the work for you? And that's where I know Talonbow can come in. Once you have the tasks identified, the tools identified, you know ideally who should perform those tools and those tasks, that puts you in a position to have very succinct and transparent job descriptions. As a recruiter, the more transparent you are in what the company is looking for, what work is required, and what skills are required, as well as the technologies and other tools that are being used, the better you position yourself to attract the right talent. For those of you that are looking for the job, be transparent as well. If there are certain skills that you know you don't have, be upfront about that. If there are certain skills that maybe you've acquired the skill, but you haven't had an opportunity to actually apply those skills, state that. The more transparent the recruiters are, as well as the more transparent the actual talent pool is, the better the chance for success. Now, part of the role that my company also plays in doing our part to close this global talent gap is to democratize access to information. It's not about a lack of desire. It's not about a lack of intelligence. Oftentimes it boils down to either not having access to the information or not being able to understand how to apply that information once you've learned it. So it does you no good to have the information. You can be in a library full of books. You can sign up for all of the LinkedIn learning courses. You can take all of the free things that are available out there on AI, on Udemy, or all of these other platforms that provide educational resources. But if you don't know how to apply it, it's not going to do you much good. So to that end, I want to encourage all of you, whether you're a recruiter, you're the person who's in a hiring position, if you are a founder or a CEO, or if you yourself are looking for work, I encourage you to look at these two different podcasts. The one on the left is called Business Infrastructure. We have 300 episodes there. This is a podcast where we are very serious about sharing resources. The guests who come onto the show not only tell you how they manage operational efficiency or how they run their back offices, how they have built their teams, but they also tell you the specific resources that they use to accomplish that and how they used it. So that's the Business Infrastructure Podcast. You can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We even have many of those episodes available for you on YouTube. The one on the right is called Scale Tales. This is our newer podcast. This is where guests come from around the world and they come on and they share these stories about how they've scaled their teams, how they have scaled their businesses, how they've been able to scale their impact and their reach. They also share resources that they leveraged in order to achieve that type of scale. So I encourage everyone, please take a look at those podcasts. Those are free resources for you. And I will soon release a full article about the two banks later this week on LinkedIn. So I definitely encourage all of you, please connect with me on LinkedIn so that you can see this full article. I think there's so much more to this story than I was able to share during this presentation, but I definitely encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And finally, we also have a YouTube channel where, again, many of our podcast episodes, the audio was converted into a video format. So if you prefer to consume your content on YouTube, you have that as an option as well. So I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions. You can do this. And thank you so much again for this opportunity. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, thank you so much, Alicia. I must say that was very, very insightful. Thank you. So please, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat while I take my question. So I can say that the story you shared is something that we can also relate to in different parts of the world, where you go to a particular institution and they are not people-centric. I mean, you can be trying to resolve an issue for weeks, and meanwhile, you go to someplace else and you just get it resolved in a very short time. So I want to find out, do you think that problem is particularly found in bigger organizations and smaller organizations don't face it, or do you think it's equally distributed? And how would you recommend? Yes, you shared some tips on how your solutions help to resolve that. But if you were to give like a general counsel, how would you recommend company leaders, regardless of how big or how small their businesses are, how would you recommend that they become more people centric than tech centric?
Okay, so to answer your first question, I've definitely, you're right. I've seen this, and this happens in America. It happens everywhere, as you mentioned, Mitchell. I remember being in a bank in Accra a couple of years ago, and I experienced this. So, so it happens everywhere. But you brought up a very good point. I personally have noticed that the larger the organization, the less customer support and customer service you receive, because they are tech first. They are relying on the technology to do much of the heavy lifting for them at the expense of us as customers. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with integrating technology into your processes. What I am saying is don't forget about the people. If your customer says, I'm having an issue, Mitchell, I'm trying to go to your website, and every time I click the submit button, I get an error or I receive an error. Please help me. But if you don't train your people, your team, to be able to properly troubleshoot, and this was something that I thought Carl did such a brilliant job of mentioning yesterday, is because we're memorized and you can be conditioned to do things one way and one way only, you lose the ability to be able to troubleshoot and think on the spot, right? And so that is the skill that I think is missing. There's nothing wrong with having the technology. We absolutely need technology. Technology is enabling us to have this conversation right now. You know, we're halfway across the world from each other. So there's much to gain from the technology, but yes, I have noticed that the larger companies tend to struggle with this more. Whereas for us as smaller businesses, we really know the value of our customers, and we know that we can't afford to lose those customers. Whereas sometimes the bigger organizations can oftentimes take their customers for granted. To answer your second question, and I want to make sure I remember it, would you mind repeating that? The second question, please.
Yes, I said, so let's imagine that there are big techs here or small techs here who have that problem of being tech-centric as opposed to leading with being people-centric. How can they change that narrative? What steps can they take?
A big part of it has to do with customer feedback. Now, here's what's interesting. So when I was at Bank One, every time I had any interaction, I often saw something, whether it was on the phone app or on the website. Please share your feedback. Don't ask for feedback if you don't intend to actually read the feedback or listen to the feedback and make adjustments. That is the number one issue. That is how you become people-centric. They're already asking for the feedback. I know Temidayo. I know him well enough to know that he is definitely going to ask everyone who is attending this summit for their feedback. But I also know that he's going to go back and he and his team will read that feedback. They will take that into consideration to understand how they can do an even better job during the next summit. That's how you become people-centric. You don't just ask people, well, what did you think about that, Mitchell? And then what you have to say means nothing to me. That's not how it works.
Okay. All right. I think that's very valid. Taking customer feedback and acting on it. So I'll ask one more question before I let you go. I know you were short for time and you made a lot of sacrifices to be here today. So I'm grateful for that. So the second question I want to ask, I'm taking it from the reverse perspective because it's easier to take this step if the leadership of the organizations realize this problem. But what if I'm a professional? So, for example, we have Demilade on this call, Gloria. I know that my organization the organization I work in is not people-centric, and they have to be. But I am not occupying the leadership position where I can drive that change. what do you advise they do? Do they just resign and find somewhere else that is people centric, or how can they bring it up?
Leaving is always an option, but it is very possible to lead that change from within, even if you are not in a leadership position. One thing that I can tell you, because I work with a lot of CEOs in small, medium, and very large organizations, people understand money. They understand if they can make more money. They understand if they are losing money. If you, Gloria, can show your leaders how they are losing money, for example, let's think about Bank One. They lost a customer. I literally had a check with me to deposit into their bank, but they lost me. Now I'm one customer, but imagine that times 100 customers, times 1,000 potential customers. When you start to put the numbers to it, put an actual financial value to that, I guarantee you'll start to get their attention. This is outside of, I know, the context of what we want to talk about, but I do want to mention this is something that I teach my students. I am a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and so we talk a lot about reducing waste. And oftentimes my students are in the same position as Gloria, where they're not in a leadership position. So I teach them how they can document processes and show the financial impact of broken or bad processes. And then they can share that with their leadership. And that's what usually gets the conversation started. So I hope that helps.
That helps. And I believe that for people listening in, this also helped them. I want to say thank you so much, Alicia. I think this was really insightful, and it's something that not just professionals, but businesses can learn with. So please, everyone, feel free to drop your excitement, and you can say thank you to Alicia in the chat. You can also connect with our on LinkedIn. Her name is Alicia Butler-Pierre. Just to confirm, you referenced the podcast. How can we get that? I think that
Sure, I can send you. I don't know if I can leave anything in the chat, but I could put a link, or I can email a link.
Okay, yes, you can email it to the talent Boat team.
Okay, sure. Thank you all so
much. Thank you. Have a good day ahead.